Today, Patrick and I want to talk about analytics governance. We want to introduce you to topics that you heard a little bit about just a few minutes ago, topics like testing, promotion, and certification, and why each is honestly critical for ensuring that Tableau content is always accurate and always reliable for decision making. We'll also talk about how to do all of this at scale, because honestly, that's the really critical piece, in our opinion, through the magic of AnalyticsOps. But before we jump into the meat of it, why don't we do introductions? Patrick,
I'm
my
Patrick.
colleague, do you want to introduce
You
yourself?
hear me? Hey, I'm Patrick. I'm VP of Product at Wiiisdom. I've been at Wiiisdom for about 6 years, but in the analytics industry for over 20. Yeah, very happy to be in DC. You hear the accent? It's from Montreal, not France. French-Canadian from Montreal, but out of the UK. So yeah, very happy to be here and talk about WiiisdomOps, our solutions for automated testing at scale with Tableau, and joined by the master hopper, Jeremy.
That's right. Indeed. Yeah. And as I mentioned previously, my name's Jeremy. I am the VP of Product Marketing here at Wiiisdom. I've been a part of the Wiiisdom team for about 7 months now, joined from a couple of startups. But before that, I was at Tableau/Salesforce for about 5 years, got my start in analytics in the US government. I was in the US Air Force. I was an intelligence officer doing analytics above the skies of Afghanistan, and then went to the private sector doing analytics for Bank of America and the HR business, and then made my way over to Tableau. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh yeah, here we've got a clicker.
Yeah,
Look at this. So let's start here. Just by a show of physical hands, or maybe virtual hands, and Ben can give us the sign of how many virtual hands are being raised. I mean, how many people have received a message like this from one of your customers or one of your stakeholders, or perhaps you're on the other side, right? How many of you have sent a message like this to one of the analysts that supports you in your reporting and analytics business? I assume all of us, right? Should see every hand, probably every virtual hand is raised. I'm going to assume that it's 100%. We've all been there, right? We've all been there on the left side of the screen. We've all been there trying to access a dashboard that won't load, or using a dashboard with data that doesn't quite seem right. Both situations are equally bad, but I would say the situation on the left-hand side is incrementally better than what's on the right, because at least you know that something is wrong. On the right-hand side, you're using a number to make a decision and to take action, but only later do you realize that that data was inaccurate. You've been here.
It's I mean, it's the thing. You try to open a report, you click refresh, it fails, it doesn't work, it sucks, but at least you're not going to make a bad decision. The one on the right is the incremental data. It says 10, it should say 8 or 12, and then you're just going to make a decision, perhaps unknowingly. Now, if it's an outlier, it should be 10, it says 50, you'll pick on it. But is the things you cannot pick on it, or non-expert in your data is going to consume a report you're giving them, or a dashboard, and then there we go, the wrong decision. So we've all been there, but this is what we need to resolve.
Usually at this point, we would turn the mic over to the audience and we'd ask you to share your sort of horror stories. And sometimes people don't participate because they're kind of afraid. Nobody likes to air their dirty laundry. So we'll sort of bypass that altogether and just move on to the next slide. I mean, the impact of errors like this, honestly, is very significant. Right? All of us, people in organizations, we've gone to great lengths to build reputations. At the individual level, I think all of us want to be, a data rock star or a data hero, that person who is delivering foolproof and very trusted analyses that drive business value. And we work hard, honestly, to be perceived that way, right? And at the organizational level, millions and billions of dollars and a whole lot of time is being invested to create a data culture, but with every dashboard that has errors in it, or error-ridden dashboard that people encounter, they lose trust, and those outcomes get further and further and further away. Does this resonate with folks? Absolutely.
How many people here take reports or dashboards, export to Excel, and then continue to modify the data to do whatever they want with it? Or Yes, yeah. Oh no, this is not good. So that's a problem. If people don't trust what they're looking at, go to Excel, go in silos, and then you're disconnected. Not good.
I love this Warren Buffett quote that we hijacked, to be totally honest. The original quote is, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. Well, I mean, Wiiisdom's spin on that is it takes 20 years, a really, really long time, and a lot of money to build a reputation and one bad dashboard to ruin it. So today what we want to do is we want to share with all of you some practical tips on how to get ahead of this, right? We're going to start by talking about dashboard validation and why that's important. And then we're going to continue on and discuss about promotion and certification. Finally, we're going to talk about how to do all of this at scale with this emerging concept called AnalyticsOps. Again, validation, promotion, certification, really, really, really important. But if you can't do that at scale, then really, what's the point? So let's start with validation.
I love ice cream.
I love ice cream. Usually I ask, who loves ice cream? Everybody loves ice cream, right? When we go into an ice cream store, what do we do? Well, I guess maybe I'm not speaking from personal experience because I've got like a habit. I go into an ice cream store, I like chocolate chip and nothing else. And so I ask for a chocolate chip and then I make my way off to whatever else I was doing. But that is not the habit of my dear wife. That is not the habit of my children. They have no idea what they want when they step into that ice cream store, right? Maybe they're looking for something sweet. Maybe they're looking for something salty. Maybe there's new flavors on the floor that they haven't seen before. The bottom line is they don't really know what they want from that case, and they don't want to make a wrong decision. And so they decide to conduct a few tests. They get the little plastic spoon, they taste a bit, they get another little plastic spoon, they taste a bit, and around they go, trying to, test the different flavors to find the one that, they're going to actually take for the walk around the park. As a people, I mean, testing has been a big part of our lives, for the past couple of years, less so over the last year, but certainly a big part in the years preceding that. All of us were required to take COVID tests prior to going to conferences, right? We were required to take COVID tests prior to entering buildings. I was working for Tableau at the height of COVID, and anytime we wanted to go into the Tableau office, at the corner of 18th and K Street in Washington, D.C., we had to take our COVID test and sit in quarantine for 15 minutes until we were cleared. None of us liked getting a COVID test. That Q-tip sort of brain tickle thing was extremely uncomfortable, but we did it anyways, right? We did it anyways because we wanted to keep each other safe and we wanted to slow the spread of COVID. Testing stuff, it's a part of our professional lives. As data and analytics professionals, we want to know with absolute certainty that our data sources and our dashboards are 100% accurate and completely reliable, right? Our stakeholders, they expect nothing less because they're using all of these assets to make decisions, to take action, to drive business value. The stakes are really high. And so I think each of us hold ourselves accountable for delivering perfection. The only thing is perfection is really, really, really hard to achieve. You have to test a lot of stuff in order to be able to say with absolute certainty that, yes, this dashboard is accurate and completely reliable for decision-making. First and foremost, accuracy, right?
Exactly. So, when we say the report needs to be right, people think, oh, the number is good. And of course, accuracy is very important and it starts with the right data. But we're not talking spreadsheets here or old school operational reporting. I come from the SAP world where Carasoft, a big SAP partners of ours over the years. It's visual. People make decisions based on, on charts, on dashboards, and the visual is important. But beside that, what is considered being a successful and a valid and accurate document? It's not only the data, the user experience. If what you're giving to the end users, if it takes 25 seconds to open and every time you filter on some things, it takes a minute, people would not adopt it. And if it's not adopted, we're back to Excels and silos and, and spreadsheets and all that. So the user experience is equally as important as the that to have validated data. Man, I cannot
Yeah,
speak
no,
today.
you got it.
So, you know,
You
then
got there. You
I
got
got
there.
this. Now security. Now security is not about do I have access to the report or not. Of course, that's important, but row level security. I'm in the UK. Can I see only UK data versus American data for Jeremy? So again, do I have the right data? Do I have data that I can only see? Is the report really working with the right performance? And then there's other things. You know, is the platform where my reports or my dashboards are held? Is that really working? So stress testing, regression testing. When you do version control, when you move from development to test to production, or you're about to make a change because the business is going to say, hey, I need better things or different things or resolve this problem in these reports. How do we make sure that what we deliver, again, has been tested and is accurate with the right experience? So it's a number of things. It's not just, is the data correct or not? It's a lot of things that needs to be right.
Yeah, and if I could embellish the user experience point just for a little bit, I mean, Tableau dashboards, when you produce one, they sort of exist along a spectrum of complexity. You've got some dashboards that are really simple, right? A couple of worksheets, couple of user filters. At the end of the day, these things don't take a long time to build because there's just a couple of viz objects on the dashboard itself. The customers that we speak to definitely have dashboards like that, but they also have dashboards that are more like apps, right? They have a ton of buttons. They've got a ton of parameters. They've got a ton of user filters. They've got a ton of level of detail calculations, which do dark magic that I still to this day do not understand. Like, I mean, you have dashboards that are operating more like apps than they are really just simple, data visualizations. And I think that's really great. These apps provide businesses with superpowers that give them the ability to understand what's happening and why it's happening. So that way the business can take action and drive business value. But the complexity introduces a whole lot of opportunity for breakages, for failure. And so when we come to this slide and say, what should you test for? Yes, accuracy, like the numbers got to be right. Absolutely. But the user experience, especially for that really complex stuff that is popping up in more and more organizations, you really need to make sure it works, because if it delivers a positive user experience, in other words, if I click, this button, this filter, this parameter, and sort of drill down to the 9th level of, purgatory or whatever, and it doesn't work, then I'm going to just say, I'm going to export my stuff. I'm going to do my pivot tables there, because pivot tables, have never let me down, but they have, right?
Yeah.
So
VLOOKUPs always work.
Exactly. So if that's what you should test for, let's talk about when you should test. Well, there are two scenarios, one that is more business driven and the other is more IT driven. On the top, you've got the business driven scenarios, analytics and reporting. Think about sort of the production process. You've got a piece of content and you are initially building it and then releasing it to your stakeholder. Well, obviously you want to run validations as a part of that initial development process. And then after the fact, we all know that things break upstream, which carry to downstream locations, or not filter names, but column names may change, data types may change, whatever. Things happen upstream of where the dashboard lives that ultimately may cause inadvertent breakages in the production dashboard. So it's also important to not just test this stuff when you're initially building it, but in an ongoing and continuous fashion once that content enters production.
It's we've all seen those static rules, static formulas, right? It's 2023 now. In a few months, will be 2024. And then suddenly data stops refreshing. And I've seen it again in my 20 years. People said, if 2023, do this, or these filters, which are hidden in the background, and they work. They work on the day you deliver. They work next month, the month after that. And then something changed. You acquire a new business, you release a new product, change of years, change. And then suddenly it's not my year to date anymore. Yeah. Something failed. So it's not testing only when you release something, but it's the ongoing monitoring, which is really important. And it brings back to the title of this presentation. It's at scale. You release a product today, a dashboard, which often looks like an application. You test it manually, it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's working today. Tomorrow, you're working on the next thing. It's unrealistic to make sure that you keep an eye on all of the stuff that you keep releasing all the time. So Yeah, monitoring for sure.
Absolutely. IT scenarios, database migrations. No, hopefully you're not doing one of these every year. But from time to time, right? You're going to move off of on-prem stuff into cloud-based stuff, or from here to there. Your Tableau dashboards are connected to that old stuff, and en masse, you're going to have to move it to the new stuff. And going through each of those dashboards meticulously to ensure that it's still accurate and it's still functional is really important, because you don't want to leave your users with an operational outage that stems from not running thorough regressions. Tableau cloud migrations, upgrades.
Yeah. Who's on Tableau server here?
Probably most.
A few, yeah, most people on the server cloud, Tableau cloud. Thank you, Blair. Hey, Blair. So yes, a lot of you are. And online, Ben, people saying anything? Not yet? Not yet. Okay. Most people will be on Tableau server. One day you'll say, I want to go to Tableau cloud. It's a change of architecture, change a lot of things again. So a lot of IT projects that will lead to even more testing than usual. Yeah, for sure.
And one thing I'll mention just on Tableau upgrades, and we'll move on. Years ago, somebody told me the number one, I was in the customer success business, and obviously like we were investing in our current customers because we didn't want them to churn out. We didn't want them to leave the Tableau family. Somebody once told me that the number one threat of renewal is customers using Tableau as it was 3 or 4 years ago. And what he meant by that is that people were not on the latest and greatest versions. And as a result, they weren't using the latest and greatest features. And as a result, like getting all the value from the latest and greatest features. When you dig into why people don't upgrade, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, but one of the biggest reasons is because they don't have time to test everything. They know that testing is super important. You're introducing a new feature and you want to make sure that that new feature doesn't cause some mass operational outage. And we'll talk about what those risks are in just a second. You don't have time to do this sort of every other day or every quarter. And so, you know, the point I'm trying to make is you need to conduct testing as a part of Tableau upgrades. Just to talk about some of the risks. So skipping steps, obviously in your BI validation process can lead to very significant and costly risks. Operationally, I think, again, just to reiterate the point, all of us or many of us have been in the situation where, you know, an upgrade or a database migration or something took place and then suddenly nobody could access all their content. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. Financial and compliance risks. All you need to do is Google calculation errors, and you will land on just countless stories about how the smallest of errors led to really big losses for an organization. Reputational, we talked about this at the beginning of this presentation, but I think many of us have been the person who has pushed a dashboard to a stakeholder that mistakenly contained an error to. You feel really silly when this happens, but it happens. And then what about opportunity, cost, and trust? A couple of years ago, Gartner reported that on average, data and analytics leaders were investing about 10% of their organization's revenue on data and analytics initiatives. That is a lot of money. And when people are repeatedly exposed to and burned by all of these different risks, they act counter to what those investments are supposed to deliver. They instead adopt old behaviors. They reestablish data silos. They rely on data downloads for reporting. Once again, this further increases the risk exposure for the organization across all of these, different categories. And what you end up with is this vicious cycle that becomes very difficult to escape from. A loss of trust means people go back to doing things the old way. That increases the risk exposure across all these categories. The more this risk is there, the less people trust their content. Again, and around and around and around you go. Anything to share? More? No?
I'm good.
Done. All right.
Done. I'm waiting for my demo.
I know, for the demo. I'll get there. We'll get there. But no, let's continue on. So though testing and validation obviously is really important. Hopefully you're in tune with that by now. It really is insufficient in and of itself. And just to best illustrate that point, I want to share an example. So I want you to imagine that you're off to, the grocery store, right? You're off to Wegmans if you're local, or I don't know, some other grocery store if you're dialed in online, and you make your way to the dairy aisle. You're craving some yogurt, And so you look at all the options and you decide to take this one home. So you put in your cart, you go to the checkout, you buy your stuff, you get home, put away your groceries, but you're kind of hungry. And so you decide to take that yogurt out, you pull back the foil, and what do you see? You see this. It's pretty gross, right? Surely, this yogurt didn't magically appear on the shelf. Somebody must have tested this product prior to it being distributed around, the country or the world. So what could have possibly happened? I'm going to move off to the next slide because that's pretty gross. We share that slide a while before lunch for very obvious reasons.
So we tried that slide at a London event a few weeks ago, and the reaction we saw here was exactly it. And we thought we need to do that again.
It was pretty gross, but it's important to elicit that reaction because of the point that I'm making, which is very, very emotional. I promise you. But really, I mean, it all comes down to this, right? The expiration date. Yogurt, as we all know, is a perishable good. Sure, people test that food and make sure that it's, quality food or a quality product, or they quality. What am I trying to say? They quality test it, quality assurance
testing, and
they do quality testing, as a part of that production process. But obviously that doesn't mean that it lasts forever, right? 2 weeks, 10 weeks. I honestly have no idea how long yogurt is good for because every time I pull back the foil, it seems to be out of date. But the point is, it's not forever.
The thing is, the example here is you trust the source. If you go to the supermarket, you've bought yogurts a million times and they'll always be fine. Why should they not? They test the product. You trust that the supermarket will use the right kind of van to move from A to B. It's been on the shelf. The shelves have been cold, overnight. There's even a date on the foil. So that's your certification, right? That you trust that it's fine. And if we're not going to put the slide again, but if you ever go to that supermarket and buy that yogurt and you get that kind of green looking yogurt, I'm pretty sure you'll not buy that yogurt again on that shelf from that supermarket the next day. So it's again trust, adoption, testing. It's not because it has worked for the last 5 years that magically 100% of yogurt will still be fine the next day. So
for sure. Yeah. I would argue that, BI content, it's a perishable good, right? Each dashboard or each analysis that we put together, it's designed for a very specific purpose. Business requirements, however, and conditions change. So your dashboards ultimately need to change, right? You need new data, you need new filter values, you need new, so on and so forth. Without that update, what was that? I don't know what that was. Maybe it was me. Anyways, it was my knee. Oh my God, my knee. No, I'm kidding. So I call 911. Without those updates that I was just talking about, bringing in new data, new filter values, that's kind of funny. It's kind of not funny, but anyways. Without those updates, though, that I'm referring to, new filter values, new data coming in, the dashboard isn't good anymore. And so what do I want to do? I want to go back here. On the left-hand side, that this content is bad. That it's moldy. On the right-hand side, you really don't know that it's bad and that it's moldy content until you take a big bite and decide to ingest it and do something with it. But I guarantee you, a week, 2 weeks, some point later in the future, you will learn, and it will be a painful lesson to have learned. So Tableau Blueprint, as Bree shared with you, it provides a roadmap for organizations to expand and optimize their use of data. As you heard, it's filled to the brim with processes and best practices related to, strategy work, data literacy, and so much more. Bree touched on this just briefly, but I'd like to, spend a minute more if it's okay. The section on content governance, which lives within sort of the governance line, it specifically addresses the problems that we're talking about here. Blueprint states that validation is important, but it needs to be followed by promotion and certification. Promotion, this refers to the task that you would take on to move this fully validated content from one location to another location, like from a pre-prod or a dev or a test project to a production project or production site. You do this because you want to keep that in progress stuff separate from the fully validated ready to go, ready for decision-making stuff. You don't want stakeholders to use this sort of in process or half-baked analysis for decision-making. You want them knowing what is actually good to go. And then certification, well, this really refers to the boxes that you check so that way stakeholders know of all of that content that lives in that production project or production site, which is not only accurate, but also reliable and therefore, not moldy and ready to go for decision making. BI content, like I said, like bread, like yogurt, like all perishable goods, it can go stale. Circumstances change, questions change, requirements change. And without certification, it's very difficult to know what BI content or what production content, I should say, is good to go. So now that we've covered the basics, the big question, I think, is how do you do all of this at scale? Let's do just a quick test here. Here we've got two different dashboards, and there are some differences between these dashboards. I think as a part of our manual validation process or manual QA process, we are walking through an exercise that looks pretty similar to this one. We take a dashboard, we take another dashboard, we print it out, or maybe, we save a tree and bring them up on two separate screens, and we start sort of using our eyeballs. We used to call it in the military, your Mark I eyeball, to look for the differences between the two. How many differences can you find? It's at this point that if I had a t-shirt cannon for every answer, I would shoot a t-shirt. So we've got Blair says 4. What are we else? 5. Bruno, you can't. You're an insider.
We're at 7 now.
But funny enough, I did this exercise internally, and I accidentally had the exact same dashboard on the left and the right, and so everybody was like, "I can't find any differences." It was at that point that I rigged the game. But let's reveal the answer, shall we? The answer is there are 9 errors. Errors are really difficult to find, especially with your eyeballs. After all, humans are error prone. Now, it was probably easy to identify some of the errors, like the bar chart lengths at the bottom, but the text values, is there a question mark where there should be a period or vice versa? And what about extra spacing? I guarantee your stakeholder is going to notice that, but are you? Some errors are very easy to identify. Some errors are not. Think about, just how hard that very simple exercise was. Now let's put all of that into the into context that I think all of you are familiar with by looking at all of the BI content that you are responsible for. So here, I think everybody here is generally working off of one Tableau environment. Probably, the majority of folks here and online are off of Tableau server, maybe a couple of sites, but the bottom line is we'll call it one Tableau environment. That Tableau environment is home to a lot of BI content. We were on the phone with a financial services organization yesterday, and they said in their Tableau site, they have one on their Tableau server, they have more than 10,000 pieces of content on their production, in their production space within that particular site. That is a lot of BI content. Now, going back to a point I made previously, each dashboard, so each one of those 10,000 pieces of content, or just for the sake of simple math, let's say 50% of those 10,000 pieces of content is pretty complex, right? It contains many visualizations. It contains several user filters, detailed calculated fields, and so on and so forth. Testing all of this during development is time consuming and to the level to where, frankly, you just don't have time to do it all. And then monitoring all of this stuff for breakages once it goes to and lives in production is also time consuming. You just don't have time to do all of that as well, right?
We're talking about one dashboard that we've seen recently, which looks like an application. How many worksheets?
A lot.
In the background?
It was a lot.
30 or 50 worksheets. And these worksheets was like, if this 1 or 0, the 1 or 0 then means you have a button. These things work until they don't, and they stop working when the data changes. And we call it the last mile of the data. This is, you have a content, and what you see on the screen is the end result of, all of these many things, and data sources, which have joins coming from data warehouses, which have been built off an ETL. So yeah, it's a long chain of things, very complex. Yeah, poor developers to do this. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And the question is how do you do it all? Well, this is where this idea of analytics ops fits in. So analytics ops, it's really an emerging methodology that adopts principles from, DevOps, data ops, ML ops, all of the ops. There's so many ops out there right now. But it takes the principles from all of that and it applies it to the cycle of analysis with a focus on automation. Analytics ops really just aims to build trust in data and analytics and increase confidence in data-driven decision-making that stems from that content by streamlining all of what we've been talking about here, right? The development, the testing, the deployment, and the monitoring processes for analytics and dashboards and reports. At Wiiisdom, we have been delivering analytics ops for BI solutions for more than 16 years. We started our journey with SAP Business Objects, partnering with our good friends at at Carahsoft for that adventure. And just a couple of years ago, we expanded into the modern BI game, beginning with Tableau. We also recently released a product for RBI, which we won't talk about here today. But our Tableau product, Wiiisdom Ops for Tableau, it automates everything that we've been talking about thus far. It automates BI testing and it streamlines the workflow that follows, helping you minimize risk exposure across all those categories that I talked about and fundamentally build trust in data and analytics. You'll see this in just a second, but Wiiisdom is a known code solution, meaning that anybody can build very comprehensive tests to validate that data visualizations are 100% accurate and comply with, business requirements as well as, regulatory requirements, which especially matters for those, who need to do outside reporting for various requirements. In addition, we'll show you in just a few minutes about how Wiiisdom accelerates regression testing for, all sorts of IT scenarios like database migrations, Tableau upgrades, and more. Regardless of the scenario, Wiiisdom very much is this solution that enables you to catch all of these errors during development and in an ongoing and continuous nature once that content lives in production. So that way you're preventing these errors from becoming risks to your organization. And then finally, the workflow piece. Obviously, testing is really, really important. That's how you get ahead of errors. But Wiiisdom will also automate the content promotion and certification process, not just for data sources, but dashboards as well. And we'll show you that in just a second, delivering, again, trusted analytics at scale. So without further ado, Patrick, do you want to do a demo and walk through Wiiisdom Ops?
Can I say no?
Nope.
No, I cannot say no. Okay. All right, excellent. Hey, thank you, Jeremy. It would be interesting to know online the version of Tableau server people are using. But if I look at people here in the room, anybody using the latest version of Tableau, or you're a few versions behind? Behind as well. If I was asking what is the #1 reason why you're not on the latest version, is it because the government? Okay, I won't get into this, but usually beside the government, why people don't apply the latest version every time there's a new release is because it takes time to install, takes time to test, takes time to repair things if there's any problem, and nobody wants the end users to find those problems, right? Ideally, it will be part of that project. So there's a number of use cases that I will talk about here that Wiiisdom Ops is going to address by automating and taking the manual pain away. And I'll just talk about migrations first because that's the one of the latest items Jeremy mentioned. But you have a server, you're going to install a new version, you have thousands, of documents and data sources and all that on that server, and you want to make sure that it's still good, after as it was before. Now, if you have two servers, I guess you could do it manually, right? You have your old server, the new server, you migrated, you check side by side like Tableau server, Tableau cloud, and you can do this. But how do you do this if you're going to take your prod server, apply a patch on top of it, and then you don't have access to the old environment? How do you know that what you're looking on the screen is the way it was just before? You cannot. So with Wiiisdom, we'll do that in a no code. Again, that's very important. Of course, this is an IT project here I'm talking about, but there will be other use cases which data analysts can absolutely do. So using a no code solution, you'll go here and you say, hey, listen, I have, okay, there's 17 here, but imagine if it says 5,000, right? I have these documents here that I want to make sure they will work after I've applied my patch, after I've went to Tableau Cloud. And I want to make sure that everything's right. Not only the data, remember what we said earlier, the data needs to be right, that's fine, but the same user experience, the same security in your data, all of these things. Well, Wiiisdom with about, I don't know, like 6 clicks or something like that, I'll take this test, and at the end, I'll give you a report. And the report is important. A lot of people will ask you for evidence that you really tested your stuff. And if we take my example here of 17 documents, I tested them, and you know what? Bad luck. 2 of them failed. 2 of them did not work as expected at the end. And what is awesome with Wiiisdom is that we'll give you explanations, we'll give you details. And if we go back to the 7 or not, it's not 7, 9 mistakes or what Jeremy had earlier, right? We'll tell you, listen, this is the dashboard the way it was before the patch, or in my old version, on my old server, before I did a database migration, or something changed, right? I'm going to make some change. I want to document the differences. We'll highlight in red exactly visually where there was a problem. Now, it's not because visually is good that it necessarily means that the data is not good. And this is why we test all of these things for you automatically. Here's a preview of the data in my dashboards before, the dashboard after. We'll validate the columns, the type of columns, the filters, the parameters. And now, here we go. This document here was supposed to highlight a number of US states, and it turns out that the document after the states are different, which led to different data and different visuals. But how would you find that out manually? Oh, is 52,000 the right number, or 57? How do you know? This is what the solution, and you know, it's a robot. Hey, robot, go and test 5,000 stuff. Who cares, right? It runs in the background. It's automated. Test as often as you want. So this is a one of the use case for, you know, issues in the back end that can affect the front end. We'll do that for you. Now, this is my favorite test here. It is my favorite.
Tell us more.
I will tell you more. Functional testing. You know, again, we said it times and times again, the data needs to be right, but the user experience needs to be right. Somebody, you know, when you test a dashboard, what do? You open it, it looks good. Let's try some filters. Looks like they refresh. Let's test a few, right? But this thing,
Patrick makes it sound simple. It's not that simple. Like thinking back to my previous life, one dashboard, I'll just tell the story. One dashboard I produced basically looked at headcount numbers broken down by diversity groupings, and that particular dashboard had a series of filters on it. And I wanted to make sure for everybody who used that dashboard that when they drilled down to their slice of the story, they actually got the data back that they should get back. And so I clicked this filter, clicked that filter, gave a thumbs up, clicked that filter, gave a thumbs up, and went through all of those permutations one by one, validating that the end result produced, you know, the data as desired. And that took a very long time, a gut-wrenching, a soul-crushing amount of time.
So if this dashboard I was giving it to you tomorrow, I'd make sure that all my worksheets are present, there's right data, that all my filters says all, that I did not forget by magic to, you know, to reset some filters, that when I change a filter, all right, I'm changing some filter here. Here we go, the data refresh, it looks good, I can click on the map, right? This thing takes a lot of time. With Wiiisdom, with just a number of steps here, which again, you've done by clicking around and not coding anything. I will run this live right now of Tableau Cloud. If it's not working, Tableau, you can tell Blair. Right, so what Wiiisdom is doing now, it's preparing the test. Here we go, my hands in the air, it's not a video. And we are contacting Tableau Cloud right now. I'm opening the same dashboard I showed you earlier and have a look at the filters, right? WiiisdomOps is now validating that the filters exist, that they have the right default values. I'm simulating changing values. You see the data is changing. I validate that the data, or just click on California right here. So here we go. So I've just done a functional test simulating an end user. And at the end, not here, but if I go to my reports, once again, I'm documenting that everything I've done has really worked in this amount of time, validating the user experience and documenting with a screenshot every time that I've performed an action. So again, we've worked with companies where auditors were asking, hey, do you have evidence that you've tested and what have you tested exactly? That is the one thing. So now we talked about certification earlier. So here we go. So I've done this test here, now there's only like 10 steps or something, but we have customers with 60, 100 steps. I've validated every combinations of every filters and parameters. I know it's good. Now, how do I let the users know that, you know what, that thing has been tested yesterday or today, not 6 months ago when it was released? That's a certification process. Because if I go to Tableau here, which is excellent, if I go back here to, for instance, my data sources, right, here we go. There is this little stamp here, certification. I can say, hey, this has been tested, excellent. But that stamp, that certification is manual. So I'm sure it was good on release day, but with 6 months later, how do I know that this is still, accurate? Things change. So with Wiiisdom, what we can do, we have these post processes where we can go ahead and tell Tableau, hey, that data source is certified. Basically, we will go ahead and we will tick that box. We'll put this green stamp and say it has been certified, and we'll put some comments, been certified by by Jeremy on that date and so on. But even more powerful is if we test something that is wrong, we will go and decertify it. So the users, when they see this rubber stamp here, they know that it can be trusted because they know it's tested regularly. Yeah. So now, this was old news. We added that about 6 months ago. Now, what we are going to release in a couple of weeks is the ability to certify the dashboard themselves. So Tableau does not offer that, Blair. Not now anyway. So we thought, hey, certification is important, but dynamic certification. You certify it today, you decertify tomorrow if there's a problem. So using WiiisdomOps, you'll be able to add this certification stamp inside of your Tableau workbook that I have now closed, obviously, but I can go back a couple of clicks. So you'll be able to add directly in the document a little Tableau extension by Wiiisdom. So users, when they open this, they know, right, once again, it's been tested yesterday, the day before by Jeremy, and I know I can trust this document. And even better, again, a test failed one day for whatever reason, the users open it, they'll see the red checkbox, and the red checkbox will say, okay, I know I cannot trust this document today. Let's call Jeremy and put it on him. Yes?
Yes. The people have been asking for dashboard certification or dashboard watermarking for a long time now. And practically how people are doing this is they're using text boxes, right? They're taking a text box, they're dropping it somewhere on the dashboard, they're writing a little comment, their initials, whatever. And I think that that's a great first step in this journey. But what happens if the dashboard is broke, but that text box remains? Now the stakeholder is looking at this saying, wait a minute, like this dashboard isn't working or has inaccurate information, yet I see this little text box telling me like it's good to go. They have difficulty reconciling all of that in their minds. And what does that do? It destroys trust in the product. Well, shoot, if this isn't accurate, and this extra level of protection isn't ensuring that it's accurate, then why am I using this thing in the first place? These are questions that people are asking. And so our approach to dashboard certification was to integrate it with Wiiisdom's test. You test, if all tests pass, great. You get the check mark, as it were. And if you then run those tests automatically overnight at 2 in the morning and something fails, well, then that check mark fails out, or the check mark turns into the, the ugly X saying, hey, there's an issue with this dashboard. Somebody's been notified, somebody's going to correct it, but there's an issue with this dashboard. It is now not safe for eating. You are beyond the expiry date. In other words, if we go back to the yogurt analogy.
So yeah, so you're a content creator leveraging data sources that have been created for you. You know that when you're going to create a new dashboard, that you're doing against a source which has been validated. If you're a report consumer, thanks to that checkbox inside of the report, you'll know, right, I'm going to consume, make decisions based on that report, and I know it can be trusted. So this is, one of the many things Wiiisdom can do. And Wiiisdom will help you with, I'll move on back to the presentation in a sec, but, making sure that your Tableau extracts have been refreshed, making sure the user experience is right and the data inside the documents are right, will help you with your technical projects, database migration, Tableau server upgrades, moving to Tableau Cloud, and of course, for Tableau server people, stress testing, making sure the environment you provide to your end users will, continue to perform when you have, the expected number of users online. So all that automatically with no code, automate your task, integrate with Slack and Team and all that. So again, all within one place with no code, very simple to use.
Perfect.
All
Thank
right.
you much, Patrick. Zip back over to the slideshow and we can conclude it. So there you have it, Wiiisdom Ops for Tableau. Just to reiterate, Wiiisdom connects to Tableau Cloud or Tableau Server, as well as your underlying data sources through JDBC. From there, you can build, run, and you can schedule tasks to support just all sorts of scenarios, right? Analytics and reporting, as well as a variety of IT scenarios. After testing is complete, Wiiisdom will promote your content to another project or another site and then certify it. And then once all of those tests are scheduled, it's really easy to configure notifications, as you just saw towards the end. That part is really important. Obviously, if things go bump in the middle of the night, you want to make sure people are notified about that, not just the stakeholders through that dashboard certification, but data stewards or analysts themselves, so that way they can quickly resolve whatever issue has popped up overnight. So there you have it. That is Wiiisdom Ops for Tableau. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to speak today. Again, Blueprint is an amazing body of knowledge, and I would encourage all of you to reference its chapters as you're building out your journey to becoming a data-driven organization, as well as when you're building out your governance strategy in particular. I do think that of those processes, though, one of the very first questions you're going to ask is, how do we scale this? Like, this is great for 10, 20, however many pieces of content, but boy, with 10,000, it's impossible to run thorough validations, to automatically promote stuff, to, run sort of continuous certification processes. It's just very, very, very difficult to scale some of those points in there. And that ultimately is what Wiiisdom Ops for Tableau allows you to do. So with that, let's conclude it. Feel free to scan the QR code, and we are happy to chat more about AnalyticsOps, but let's see if there's some questions, either in the room or virtually.
We have one in the room. That's great.
So thank you very much. Great presentation. My name is Dave, and I work in a healthcare startup company. So I just want to understand the use case. I think it does provide some great value, but, is this tool mainly focused on just the workbook and the data source testing? It looks like, and maybe I'm wrong here, there is like, before you say something is right or not, there is an assumption made something else is right, and you do the comparison test. I mean, that's a lot of time you do validation. But what if there are some things in your data warehouse that are wrong, data pipeline being broken, and maybe that's not the scope of this tool? Maybe there's something else that needs to pair with this, but just understand this on the scope for the testing.
For sure.
Yep. Either way.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the question. And you highlight the point, which is a very good point, that at the end of the day, the decisions is made out of the dashboard, and it's the end journey of the data being transformed a lot. Now, at Wiiisdom, or not only at Wiiisdom, but with Tableau Blueprint, what we're seeing here is that we need to make sure we do the same TLC. You say TLC in the US?
Yeah.
Tender love and care, yeah,
Tender Love and
TLC,
Care,
yeah, there you
yeah.
go. So the
It's not
same
just
thing.
not just one of my favorite bands, but also Tender Love and Care.
But yeah, the same TLC you're doing in the back end, you know, the data warehouse, the ETL, that needs to continue. That's why there's data ops. And you know, I don't like the expression garbage in, garbage out, but it needs to be right in. You know, if it's not right, of course the dashboard will be wrong. But a lot of the people are saying, you know, we do a lot of events and people say, listen, I've just spent millions of dollars and thousands of man hours on making sure that my data warehouse is right. Why is my dashboard going to be wrong then? Well, that's for the reasons we explained is, yes, we connect to your dashboard, no doubt. But once you're in Tableau, what do? Maybe you decide to merge it with another spreadsheet, and maybe the end users will do a bit of SQL or put a left join instead of a right join, and the formulas and the tons of worksheets and all that. So yes, what we're saying is, it needs to be right at the beginning. Continue to invest time and money on the what we call the left hand, you know, at the back end. But once this is right, and it should be, make sure you apply the same TLC once again on your analytics, which is why we call it AnalyticsOps. So it shouldn't stop at the data ops. It should go all the way to the end, and which is why, yeah, we call it AnalyticsOps. Is that answering your question?
I'll add just a little bit more. People commonly put data and analytics governance together in sort of one string of words. And I think that is something we should stop doing, because rarely are people looking at the whole, right? They're looking at data governance and they're investing in tools that allow them to advance their data governance strategy. Tools like Big Eye and Monte Carlo and Informatica and this and that. And those are great tools, don't get me wrong. But when you look at the analytics layer, all of the problems that those tools are solving within the data storage part of the journey and the data processing part of the journey, are being addressed. But you look at the analytics space and people are ending up with broken dashboards and bad dashboards and all these other things. There are no other tools that are doing governance stuff for analytics and BI content. Wiiisdom is really the only one on the market. And so I prefer that people sort of think about those things as equally, well, first of all, to separate those things and to think about those two parts as being equally important. But it's a good question. Thank you. But you can yell it out. We can repeat it, or Ben is delivering a microphone to you.
Thank you. My name is Jasmine. Thank you for your presentation. My question, I would say, is more related to the Tableau blueprint. And I saw that the Able extension is being rolled out. And in terms of the concern about the hallucinations of AI, how is that, well, in the context of Tableau blueprint, how is that being mitigated when things are being developed using those tools? And as well as Wiiisdom, I'm sure there's a lot of machine learning related to the tools. So just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think it all comes down to governance, right? I think it comes down to governance before you release, you know, content or capabilities. I mean, really thinking through if the right controls, roles, and processes are in place to prevent those things from delivering unintended outcomes. I don't know. I think we're all data people, we're all technology people. And so I think we often want to get our hands on like the latest and greatest and the new stuff. And for good reason. We know that latest and greatest and new stuff can deliver powerful capabilities. You just need to be very deliberate about sort of the rollout of those things. And I think deliberateness begins by thinking about governance around all of that. You probably.
I mean, just another dimension to this is that AI will produce content that you have not created, right? And based on some rules and some learning, of course, but you did not create that content. I'm very excited to see Tableau Pulse release later this year. Tableau Pulse will not magically create something out of nowhere. It's based on some rules and things you have implemented in the backend, but the end result will be produced on the fly. And I think Wiiisdom Ops or AnalyticsOps, in a way, is probably even I'm not saying more important, but it's especially relevant when you have AI produced content. The end users, we can call Ben. Ben, you screwed up, right? The AI, who's calling AI? Blair. We'll call Blair. I played on Blair a lot today. But, so yes, now AnalyticsOps, I think it's absolutely even more relevant with non-human produced content for sure. Yeah.
Other questions in the room or virtually?
Oh, that's
We
all
do
good
have
one.
some online questions.
Yeah, maybe we'll do like maybe like two more and then progress to the next.
Sure. This one's coming from Brian online. Hi, great session. Can you comment on security considerations with AI model scanning data that is in the dashboard?
Out of our scope, probably.
I would say it is. I mean, it is a great question, but yes, it is indeed out of our scope. We're here to make sure that the output is correct based on a number of criterias. Is the data right? Or the filters right? Is the performance, the experience, all that is right? Now, about the security concern of to have an AI machine learning something consuming your own data. Yeah, it's a great question,
Yeah.
but
We can follow up offline if that would work.
yeah, that's absolutely, yeah.
Sure. We'll follow up with you, Brian. And then the next question, can we test for all functionalities on Tableau, like quick filters and parameters?
Oh,
What about ad hoc buttons on Tableau?
that is a great question. I know who asked that one, but should work for Wiiisdom.
The
but,
answer is the
but-
answer is
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. So with Wiiisdom, I don't know if people can still see my screen, but yeah, with Wiiisdom, we can change filters, we can change parameters. We have the ability to, I even have it somewhere. Here we go. We can simulate, we can click on navigation buttons and other type of buttons you have in your dashboard. So absolutely, yeah, we can do all that.
Yeah. Anything else, Ben? All right.
All right. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having us today. We appreciate your time.